Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today we're gonna discuss about Phalaenopsis orchids, mainly about Novelty Phalaenopsis versus the standard Phalaenopsis. I told you a few things this week, and I was actually waiting for one of my novelties, apparently that's how it's called, to open up her buds, but she's taking her time, so we're just gonna do this today. I do have older footage, so it's okay. Now, I recently watched a webinar on the American Orchid Society which talks about the subject, and really these Novelty Phalaenopsis are what I used to call the summer blooming Phalaenopsis. No surprise there, I really like those phals. These are standard Phalaenopsis. They're the ones we're used to seeing in flower shops and garden centers. And most of us have quite the impressive collection of the standard Phalaenopsis. Not all that many of us have the summer blooming Phalaenopsis, their hybrids, or what they started to call the novelty phals. Now, being that the webinar is an exclusive feature of being a member, a paying member of the American Orchid Society, I cannot really show you print screens like I usually do whenever we talk articles or discussions or things of the sorts, because not only is it not ethical, but also I would get in trouble. So you're just gonna have to take my word for it if you're not a member, or if you're a member, just search for the Novelty Phalaenopsis webinar. You'll find it. It's really interesting. I'm not gonna tell you everything about it, of course, but I will touch base with a few details that were discussed in that webinar, and also we're gonna make a comparison between the two. They are quite different types of orchids, and even if I don't have too many novelties in bloom at the moment, if you want to see some blooms with these orchids in the following months, just subscribe to my channel because their season has just started and I do have quite a lot of them on the way to me from orchid nurseries. So what is the standard Phalaenopsis? Well, pretty much it's the complex hybrid that we can find in flower shops, garden centers, the hybrids that have been obtained by men to suit customers' needs. They have pretty big flowers, long arching flower spikes, they are big plants, as you can see, and they all derive from a few species that do possess these characteristics. The standard Phalaenopsis are easy to take care of, they're very suitable for a home. They come in many colors, many patterns. There are a whole bunch of hybrids on the market, so many that some don't even have names. They're pretty much what I always refer to as the complex hybrids. Now, recently, when I started to get into the species, I discovered there are quite a few types of species. First, you have the Phalaenopsis schilleriana, which is very similar to the standard Phalaenopsis. Yes, it has beautiful mottled leaves and it has fragrant flowers, but the growth pattern, the bloom pattern, what induces it in bloom is very similar to the standard Phalaenopsis. But then there are the summer blooming ones, or at least I call them like that. These orchids do not produce big flowers, but rather tinier flowers. They don't open as many at one time, but they are very fragrant, and typically they have a really bright colors. Now, the summer blooming ones are the ones that I like the most. I'm not saying the standards or that the schilleriana is not beautiful, I just prefer the compactness of the blooming with these summer blooming ones. Therefore, I purchased quite a few species, the Pghalaenopsis, the Violaceous, the Tetraspis. They're hybrids I used to call the primary hybrids if they were primary, or simple hybrids, but it wasn't necessarily correct when I ran into the Phalaenopsis Leodoro, which is not quite that simple. So even with the summer blooming Phalaenopsis, there are such complex hybrids that you cannot call them simple hybrids or primary hybrids or summer blooming hybrids. How do we call them? Well, apparently Mr. Peter Lin, who held the webinar, calls them novelties, and he is a hybridizer specialized in the Phalaenopsis summer blooming ones. And I think we'll start hearing the name more and more as hybrids just start popping up, because it seems it is a focus right now in the orchid hobby to use these orchids in hybridizing with other types of Phalaenopsis in order to obtain fragrant Phalaenopsis or flashy colored Phalaenopsis. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, so now let's touch base a little bit on what separates the novelty from the standard and a few differences between them. I will touch base a bit with what was in the webinar, but most of these things, they're not news. I've already told you guys about these things in previous videos when I talked about these orchids, but let's just organize them under one umbrella. Now, if you visit the public page of the iOS on Phalaenopsis orchids, you will see they are actually split into 5 subgenres. We're gonna talk mostly about 2 of these subgenres. One is the Phalaenopsis, and the other one is the Polychilus. The standard Phalaenopsis derives from species included in the Phalaenopsis subgenre, while the Novelty Phalaenopsis are hybrids from the subgenus Polychilus. The main representatives, and as Mr. Peter Lin says, the building blocks for the hybrids are the Phalaenopsis Bellina, which I'm sure many of you know. I have a Bellina for quite a while now, and she is absolutely gorgeous, a fragrant, colorful, full of substance Phalaenopsis, which blooms in the summertime. Then we have, of course, the Phalaenopsis Violaceous, which is a very similar orchid, and not long ago it actually contained the Bellina as well as a variety Borneo. Other species though includes Gigantea, Venosa, Ludemaniana, but there are others as well. Pretty much you get the idea. All of these orchids that have beautiful shiny leaves, they don't produce many flowers. The flowers are usually tiny, but they're very colorful, very fragrant. They pretty much all belong to the subgenus Polychilus, and the novelties are representatives of this subgenus. And now, to understand why this interest for hybridizing and developing the Polychilus subgenus, we need to compare the two. What makes this genus special or different from the standard Phalaenopsis? Well, of course, there's the physical differences. The flowers of the Polychilus family are all full of substance, waxy, sturdy, and in many cases very fragrant. The Violaceous and the Bellina are some of the most fragrant and most beautifully smelling orchids I own. Their blooming behavior is very compact if we compare them to the standard Phalaenopsis. And while this is debatable, some people prefer the standard Phalaenopsis type of cascading blooming, and of course that has an appeal, but also the very compact and subtle display of the Polychilus is also very desirable, at least for me, and especially for those of us who don't have a lot of shelving space. Even though the standard Phalaenopsis are visually pleasing and beautiful, they do lack something very important, at least for me, and that is fragrance. Many of them do not possess a fragrance, and the ones that do, well, it's not necessarily something to be called very perfumey. It's a scent, it's there, but if you've ever smelled a Bellina, you absolutely cannot compare them. So one of the main attractions with focusing on this genus is, of course, the fragrance. So that's a bonus for some of us, but the main attraction besides the fragrance is coloring. The Polychilus subgenus has the most beautiful, flashy, full of substance, colors and patterns in the whole Phalaenopsis family. And now I'll tell you something that I found very interesting in this webinar. What they're actually aiming for is obtaining red, solid red and solid yellow colors. With the standard Phalaenopsis, this is almost impossible. How many pure red Phalaenopsis orchids have you seen on the market? Not that many, and if it's red, it's a pale red or a weird purpley red, or if it's pure red, it's pretty much fading away. I do have an example to show you actually. In the world of the Polychilus, this doesn't really happen. Colors don't fade away from these orchids, and the red is pure red. And P.S., this is a Tetraspis hybrid. She has variable blooms, but this particular hybrid, instead of having red and white flowers, it has red and yellow flowers. Every time she can bloom different. It just so happens that this time she bloomed red. Imagine the possibilities in hybridization. Anyway, so as Mr. Lin was saying, to have a really nice and not faded red, you need to have a very nice and solid yellow base. So I'll show you on a standard what this means. So here we have the Phalaenopsis Sierra Francis. I showed you this orchid recently as part of my favorite types of Phalaenopsis complex hybrids. I called this one a pickety type of Phalaenopsis because of the edging, and I was telling you at the time that this orchid, as beautiful as it is, it kind of fades away coloring wise. So when it opens, enjoy it for 2 weeks or so, and then make your peace with the fact that the colors will totally disappear. So this is a flower that opened pretty recently. But let me show you an older flower that already has started to fade away. So let's take a look at these two flowers and see what's happening. As you can see, the yellow is fading away, and also the red, even if it's not fading away that much, it transforms. and the color that it transforms to is purple. Now, purple is such a very common color in the standard Phalaenopsis world because of the species that went into producing these hybrids, that it's pretty logical that many individuals have the purple gene. However, the red pigment is simply a combination of the yellow background and the purple pigment. When the yellow goes away, here comes the purple. So that's why in the world of the standard Phalaenopsis, red is such a rare color, and if you find reds in this standard genus, they're usually not the brightest of reds. So comparing the Pghalaenopsis Francis to the fly eagle that I showed you, you can see the major difference between the red of this orchid, which is pretty vivid when the flower opens, but then it goes away, and the very vivid red that comes from the Tetraspis orchid. So one of the main focuses in hybridizing the Pghalaenopsis subgenus is to obtain this really vivid red and yellow that doesn't really fade away. And then with these hybrids, go to the other genuses, particularly the Phalaenopsis genus, and try to make hybrids which look or have the same blooming pattern as the standards we know today, but with the texture, coloring, and even fragrance of the Pghalaenopsis group. How wonderful would that be? Imagine the standard Phalaenopsis with their flower size and flower count, but looking more like the Pghalaenopsis, more like the Pghalaena. How wonderful is that? Well, it depends. I actually do like the compactness of the other Phalaenopsis, but hey, I'm pretty sure that if I would see something like this with the colors of the Tetraspis, I would flip. I would flip. So that's why it's really exciting right now what they're trying to do. And PS, this webinar is about 3 years old already. So I think it's time we will start to see some hybrids. Until we reach a pure standard looking like Phalaenopsis with the colors of the Pghalaena, I think it's gonna take a while. And for now, I am looking forward to expanding my orchid collection with some novelty Phalaenopsis. Speaking of which, I didn't discover, Jessica, who has sent me quite a lot of orchids last year, has shown me a store, an online nursery here in Europe that has one of the biggest collections of Pghalaenopsis types of orchids, hybrid species, and so on, that I just had to try it out. I placed an order to this company. I'm not sure when it's gonna arrive. I'm not sure if next week or the other week, but I did order a few of these Phalaenopsis, and I'm just so excited because I've never seen such a variety in a store before. I'll link it down below to the store. I cannot recommend it or anything because I didn't try it until now. All I can say is that customer service was nice so far. I just placed my order and we'll see how fast it arrives. It's from the Netherlands, and as you can see, the prices for some of these orchids are not low, you guys. I think the most expensive one is 900 euros. So, you know, there are prices there for everybody. If you have the budget to spend a lot of money, you have what to pick when it comes to Phalaenopsis. I didn't order anything super expensive, especially that it's my first time ordering from this company, but I am excited, and of course I'll do an unboxing. I'll let you guys know how it is. And we didn't do that choose my orchid bit because there are so many expensive orchids that I cannot afford that, you know. I don't like to tell you guys, yes, choose my orchid, but nothing over 50 euros because, you know. So yeah, that's why we didn't do the pick my orchid. But yeah, excited about this. And finally, we can call these hybrids and these orchids something. And let me know down below how many of you have a collection of these types of orchids. Do you like them? Is there anything I should look out for? What is very fragrant? I'm a fragrance freak, you know that. And if you want to see my current collection, although it's a little bigger than it used to be, check the link down below. I'll share with you my previous videos on these types of orchids. You might see right now that some of my orchids are in sphagnum moss while others are in semi-hydro. We'll touch base with this when I get my other Phalaenopsis because it's a care, cultural, actually related subject. So we'll get into the subject in a different video. But these orchids that you see in moss, they're a sort of last resort. These are orchids which have never done great for me. Some of them I ordered, some I received. They have always been very finicky and very fragile. So either they're diseased, either they really didn't adapt to semi-hydro, I don't know. As a last resort, I'm trying the, let's say, traditional medium for these orchids, which is sphagnum moss. Not bark, sphagnum moss. I'm not sure if you'll ever receive an orchid, one of these Phalaenopsis actually, from a reputable nursery in something other than sphagnum moss. All of my polychilus came in sphagnum moss, and I see that everybody kind of offers them in sphagnum moss, even the orchid web. So anyway, that's for a different discussion, but that's why some of them are in moss. It's a last resort if they're gonna pick up growth good. If not, that's that. Here we are. So alrighty guys, thank you so much for watching this video and hanging out with me on this beautiful Sunday. I like when the birds sing outside. It only happens in spring because summertime is way too hot for them. So you know the drill. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!